Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the 2024 DRAM Demand Response Auction Mechanism Bidders Web Conference held by the joint IOUs. Thank you all for your time. Quick introduction before we jump into the materials. In terms of our scope today, we are, next slide, please. In terms of or calling the 2024 pilot request for offers, and we will not discuss other demand response programs or utility procurement programs. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started. All participant phone lines are muted, and if you do have any questions or comments, please use the Q&A chat box via the webinar. We will provide opportunities to respond to those questions throughout the presentation as we have breaks between each section. Next slide, please. In terms of our agenda, we're going to run from 10 to noon today. That's the time we have allocated. We'll go through the overview and then jump in more on the specifics of the bid valuation selection process. Also give an overview of the bid materials and then talk about the template and offer forms for the qualifying capacity, and then walk through the IOU specific offer forms, a bit of difference between 3 IOUs, and then we'll provide any opportunities for last minute questions and comments. Next slide, please. Gonna hand it over to Abby Snyder from SDG&E as our legal representative to just present the legal disclaimers.
Hey there. Yep, this is Abby Snyder from SDG&E, and I wanted just to remind all participants about our antitrust guidelines for today's webinar. All participants are reminded about antitrust guidelines, and these direct us to avoid discussions or topics of behavior that could result in anti-competitive behavior, including restraint of trade, conspiracy to create unfair or deceptive business practices or discrimination, allocation of production, imposition of boycotts, and exclusive dealing arrangements. And then a second reminder is just document conflict. There's lots of information presented today, and if there is a conflict or an inconsistency between the information provided in the webinar and the requirements in the RFO materials, the RFO materials shall govern. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Next slide, please. So general question and answer guidance, we have posted across all 3 IOUs questions and answers on our specific IOU DRAM RFO websites. The links are provided here on the slide. We will be posting the slide deck as well as the recording of this webinar after the webinar is over in the next day or two. Q&As that apply to all 3 IOUs are going to be included on all of our websites, but IOU specific questions are only on the associated IOU website. And questions can be submitted via email if you think of a question after this webinar at any time until the question submittal deadline. And we'll take a look at the schedule in a later slide. Please make sure you CC the independent evaluators at Merrimack IE when you email any questions. And additionally, questions received and answers will be posted to the websites periodically, and we'll make sure the websites are updated. Deadline to submit questions, February 23rd, so in 2 days, and then we will post the final set of answers no later than February 28th. Just a reminder that offers are due on March 7th, but again, we'll take a look at the schedule in more detail in the later slide. Next slide, please. Before I move on to the pilot overview any questions and answers? I don't see any, but if we get some, please post them. Next slide, please. So I'm going to jump in onto a bit of regulatory and program background for the DRAM. So it originated as a commission staff proposal in the demand response OIR, changed to a pilot by decision 1412-024, and continue for subsequent years pursuant to all the decisions here. And it was last modified in decision 2301-006. So it's envisioned as a supply-side demand response approach for third parties that provides a capacity, also referred to as resource adequacy payment for demand response aggregators. So the aggregators participate directly in the CAISO markets with customers in the investor-owned utility service area. It's an alternative to bilateral aggregator managed portfolio contracts and other IOU demand response offerings. The program is also a vehicle to encourage new participants in the demand response market. The 2024 DRAM continues to have a 10% set aside for new market entrants as the last DRAM. So the minimum August 2023 offer capacity bid, minimum energy requirement, and it takes the standard contract for resource adequacy, so there's no bilateral negotiations of the contract. Capacity for the program may vary by months for delivery during one or more months from January to December 2024. The budget for the 3 IOUs are listed here at the last bullet point: SCE at 6 million, PG&E at 6 million, and SDG&E at 2 million. Next slide, please. In terms of capacity product definitions, we have 3. The system capacity is a IOU-wide, must be bid per CAISO, must offer obligation day ahead and or real-time market as a P demand response resource. In terms of the local capacity, must be located in the local capacity areas. Same must offer obligation as system. And for SCE, the LCA covers the LA Basin and Big Creek Ventura substations. PG&E, the local capacity product must be within one of PG&E's 7 LCA listed in Appendix A offer form, which we'll walk through, and Exhibit J of the purchase agreement. And for SDG&E, the entire service area is the local capacity area. And for the third definition, in terms of the flex capacity, there's 3 categories, 1, 2, or 3. It bids into a day ahead and real-time energy market, able to ramp and sustain energy output for a minimum of 3 hours, must be a PDR resource, addresses variability and unpredictability created by intermediate resources. Also must bid per CAISO, must offer obligation for flexible resources. Can we go back one slide? Just want to make a note that the bullet point in the middle of the page here should be minimum August 2024 offer capacity bid. Also, general bid can have any type of customer included. Customer can use on-site renewable energy or energy storage to provide load reductions for the program. Customers can have backup fossil generation, but cannot use it for DRAM load reductions. And the seller is responsible for enforcing this requirement. So please see Article 7 of the pro forma. And please note that this language is subject to change pursuant to commission resolutions or decisions on prohibited resources. In terms of roles and responsibilities for the different participants, the CAISO receives product registration from the Demand response participant receives bidding and scheduling activities from the scheduling coordinator, operates market and dispatches resources, as well as determines performance and settlement in conjunction with the scheduling coordinator. And for the scheduling coordinator, they act as the demand response provider in this program. And then to bid into the PDR, into the CAISO market, sellers will be required to use CAISO qualified scheduling coordinator to conduct market and business transactions with the CAISO. It facilitates DPR scheduling and bidding activity with the CAISO, as well as facilitates settlement and calculation of baselines of performance. The scheduling coordinator will also handle business relationships and transactions with the CAISO. Scheduling coordinator also provides information should there be an IOU audit of demonstrated capacity. And please visit the link below for the 2024 scheduling coordinator aggregated information packets. And the other participant is the wholesale demand response provider, DRP or aggregator. This participant submits resource registration to CAISO consisting of unique customers, submits customer information service requests, demand response provider for each service account to authorize IOU to release customer data. And the participant also needs to meet CAISO PDR requirements as well. Last but not least, we have the seller. The seller abides by all provisions of the DRAM purchase agreement. Please be familiar with your obligations as a deemed DRP. Provides required security posting to buyer per contract. Submits qualifying capacity information roughly 75 days prior to delivery months and supply plans roughly 60 months prior to delivery months. Works with the scheduling coordinator to provide statement of demonstrated capacity, and also works with the scheduling coordinator if there's an audit of demonstrated capacity. Seller provides required registration data for residential DRAM resource, compliance with CAISO market rules, CPU CRA rules, and Rule 2432 tariff. The seller also works with customers or aggregators to provide load reduction, works with the scheduling coordinator to bid DRAM resources via appropriate CAISO product and market and complying with the CAISO must offer obligation. Seller receives meter data for settlement from IOU and also settles with customers and scheduling coordinator and retains earnings from the market participation. This slide gives a overview of direct participation and resource adequacy illustration of the program. The graphic on the left provides the relationship of all the different stakeholders in this program that we just covered in the last few slides. And the box here provides another summary that the third-party direct participation and resource adequacy rules. And for third-party direct participation, seller aggregates customers for DRAM resource. The seller bids directly into the CAISO market through the scheduling coordinator. Dispatches and settlements are between the CAISO and the seller scheduling coordinator. And all earnings in the CAISO markets go to seller and seller customer, so the IOUs are not involved. In terms of the RA rules, seller provides supply plan to IOU 60 days prior to the months. The seller provides qualifying capacity information to the IOU roughly 75 days prior to the months. And then the seller provides demonstrated capacity through the scheduling coordinator to IOU at the end of the month. So jumping back, buyer, which is the IOU, abides by the provisions of the DRAM purchase agreement as well. The IOUs evaluates the qualifying capacity estimates for reasonableness and determines if capacity should be derated, claims RA credit for the demand response resource provided by the seller, not involved in the CAISO market settlements. and the IOUs pay seller all undisputed amounts for DR capacity after the delivery months upon receipt of statement of demonstrated capacity by seller. And the IOUs also have the right to audit capacity delivered under demonstrated capacity contract permissions. Also, a note that customer data provision by the IOUs validates customer eligibility upon receipt of CISR DRP from aggregator/DRP and provides meter data to aggregator/DRP per conditions of the CISR DRP and Rule 2432 tariff. The independent evaluators for this solicitation across all three IOUs is the Merrimack Energy Group, Wayne Oliver, Keith Oliver, as well as Mark Smith, our main staff from Merrimack. The role of the IE is to ensure reasonable and uniform treatment of all potential counterparties by monitoring the solicitation and discussion processes, the IOU evaluation methodologies and selection processes, as well as reviewing bids to ensure competitive process and no market collusion or market manipulation by some sellers, reporting to the Commission on the auction process. The IE is privy to all offers, invited to participate in all discussions, review all bids, reviews bidding scoring selection, and must be copied on all correspondence between each IOU and their bidders, as we described in the beginning of this webinar. Again, please make sure that in any correspondence as well as questions that are emailed, please CC the IEs through the Merrimack email. The IEs are participating in this bidders webinar as well. Gonna take another break and give a quick opportunity for folks to answer any questions, but I don't see any Q&A.
I'm not seeing any at the moment.
Okay. Let's move on to the next section. So we have staff representatives from PG&E to provide an overview of the valuation selection process next.
Hi, thanks, Aaron. This is Mari Turner at PG&E. I covered this bid valuation selection process. So the IOUs encourage diverse business enterprises, or DBEs, to participate in the DRAM RFO, such as the businesses owned by women, minority, disabled, veteran, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender business enterprises. General Order 156, or GO 156, was adopted by the CPUC in 1986, with electric procurement added in 2012. It's to promote greater competition among utility suppliers by expanding the available supplier base and to encourage greater economic opportunity for DBE historically left out of utility procurement. GO 156 also sets the rules governing the development of programs to increase participation of DBEs and procurement of contracts from utilities as required by CPUC code. For additional information, please visit or contact an IOU supplier diversity website listed here. Next slide, please. As part of the valuation and selection processes, bids must comply with all the requirements of the RFO. Any bids with conformance issues will be discussed with the independent evaluator, or IE, which is Merrimack Energy. The goal is to ensure all bidders are treated in a fair manner. There will be a cure period. During this period, bidders will only be allowed to change fields that the IOU has stated require revisions, if any. No changes will be allowed to any other fields. Bidders will not be allowed to correct pricing level unless specifically requested by the IOU during the cure period, it is the responsibility and duty of the seller to accept full risk for pricing and developing their project. Failure to respond to inquiries by the IOUs regarding incomplete or incorrect information could result in disqualification from the RFO. The IE will review and validate methods of processing the bid information and evaluating offers to ensure that the evaluation is done fairly with no preferential treatment to any bidder. Affiliate bids, if any, will be closely examined during the evaluation offers process to ensure the offer is evaluated in the same manner as the other offers. All communication and negotiations will closely be monitored and assessed by the IE to ensure no preferential terms and conditions are included in the offer. Next slide, please. In accordance with CPUC approval, DRAM offers will be selected according to the following method. Offers shall be ranked by net market value, NMV, per unit, adjusted for qualitative criteria, which will be detailed on the next page. IUs will select offers that in aggregate of all contracts will exceed the authorized budget, which is a budget that includes both contract cost and administrative cost. And then IUs may not select an offer if the offer price is above the long run avoided cost of iteration, known as LRAC, which currently is $257.05. And then may also not elect to select an offer if one or more of the monthly capacity prices they offer are outliers, or if the offer is not viable based on assessment of the QC estimate provided by the bidder. And lastly, at least 10% of the August megawatt procured must be set aside for new market entrants. A new market entrant is defined as a provider who has not integrated any demand response resources into the calculation market. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, this slide shows qualitative criteria applied to 2024 DRAM offers. These are the same criteria since 2021 DRAM. Bidders that are certified small business receive 1% reduction in their cost. If a bidder declined a contract when extended a short list offer, can increase their cost by 3%. And if a bidder willfully terminated or defaulted a DRAM contract since 2019, can increase their cost by 10%. If a bidder delivered demonstrated capacity totaling less than 75% of total contract capacity for all contracted months since January 1st, 2019, their cost can increase by 5%. And then, however, if a bidder delivered demonstrated capacity invoices totaling more than 95% of its total contracted capacity and all of its contract months in its most recent DRAM contract, then can reduce their cost by 5%. Next slide, please. The procurement review group includes the CPUC Energy Division, Public Advisor's Office, or PAO, the Utility Reform Network, TURN, and other interveners. The PRG oversees the procurement process of all three IOUs. During the course of this RFO, the independent evaluator will be reporting on the progress and issues on this RFO to the PRG. Public and confidential IE reports will follow the required IE template guidelines. And these reports are submitted to the CPUC with the request of the CPUC contract approval. Next slide, please. Okay, this is time for questions. If you have any, please submit to the Q&A box.
Doesn't look like we have any questions at this time.
Okay. We can move on. Hand this over to Mark.
Thanks, Mari. This is Mark Bergender in the contract origination team at Southern California Edison. I'll be walking you through some of the DRAM RFO materials. So firstly, a note on successful offers. What are the keys to a successful offer? First, read, understand, follow the instructions that are posted on the respective IOU websites. Know the deadlines and what is expected at each deadline. We'll touch on that in the next slide. Review all the documents on each of the IOU's DRAM websites, also as referenced in slide 5. There are FAQs posted to the IOU's DRAM websites, which are a collection of previously asked questions, and any Q&A posted to this presentation will be added to those FAQs. If you have questions, you can find the emails for the IOU DRAM teams on our websites. And if you do send us an email, we ask that you copy Merrimack, whose email is listed there again. Next slide, please. What are the dates? It's a great question. Here are the answers. We launched on February 13th. It was a week and a day ago. Today is February 21st. We are having the bidders web conference. Important date, March 7th is the deadline for RFO submittal. I believe SCE is asking for offers prior to noon on March 7th. So please note that. We will be doing complete and conforming and working with bidders to cure any deficiencies, and will notice bidders of their selection status on Wednesday, April 26th. And we are targeting or are required to file advice letters for contract approval on June 1st. Next slide, please. Okay, a summary of the 2024 DRAM program is also a summary of the 2023 DRAM program. So in that first section, valuation changes were adopted for last year or for 2022, and they were carried over for 2023, and then again carried over for 2024. So what were those changes adopted for 2022? Well, system, local, and flex. There were minor updates to the qualitative criteria, as was mentioned previously. The weighted long run avoided cost of generation for offers of less than 12 months. We updated for the 2022 RFO, updated the assessment of QC viability, and DRAM resources shortlisted are using the net LRAC long run avoided cost methodology. Operating months are still January to December. The authorized budgets are still $6 million for SCE and PG&E and $2 million for SDG&E. Program updates for 2022, which have been carried over for the last 2 years. Resource ID sharing between contracts is prohibited. Customer movement across resource IDs in different delivery months is limited, including the exemptions adopted in D1907-009 for customer movements within a delivery month. CPUC decision D2106-029 extended DRRA requirements to include Saturdays. And then D2301-006 is the most recent decision, which carried over or extended DRAM for an additional year, which is why we're presenting here. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through this. You could use this as a shortcut for navigating the purchase agreement. The purchase agreement is the same for all IOUs, also posted on the website. So if you find the agreement on SCE's website, you will find the same agreement on PG&E and SDG&E's website. Again, the major sections are detailed here, and you can use this as a shortcut for when navigating that those agreements. I will just read the bold red text. So know the obligations you are taking on in the event of an awarded DRAM contract. And you can find those obligations in the contract. Next slide, please. Supply plan requirements. IOUs expect respondents to provide the resource IDs, NQC values, year-ahead supply plan, and other relevant information about the resources in a form that is substantially similar to Exhibit F. And you can find Exhibit F in the contract, and there's a screenshot of it later on in this presentation. We need this information both for our year-ahead RA compliance and our monthly RA compliance. So we consider this very important information. QC information is also due 10 business days before supply plan information. All values on the supply plans and in the offer form submitted by respondents should be entered to the nearest hundredth of a megawatt. So we ask that you round. So not 5.208, but 5.21. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next few slides are screenshots of the exhibits in the contract. I don't know if it'd be very useful to go through all these exhibits here. You will find emails for the IOUs on our websites. And if you have questions about these exhibits, I ask that you just email us directly, and we can answer those questions. So this is a form of notice, demonstrated capacity, Exhibit C1. This is where you enter your demonstrated capacity. Exhibit C2, again, form of notice, demonstrated capacity. James, can we go to slide 32, please? So here are exhibits detailing protocols for data issues, which I suggest you read because sometimes there are data issue reporting, and this will instruct on how to handle those. And then on the right side there, Exhibit E, minimum energy dispatch requirements. There are energy requirements, and I suggest you read this to understand what those are. Exhibit F on slide 33, please, is form of notice, monthly supply plan. Moving on to the next slide, Exhibit G, implementation guidelines for qualifying capacity, and also very important. Exhibit H, the milestones on slide 35, and form of progress reports for meeting those milestones. And then the next slide is questions. So I know I went through that very quickly. Again, if you have questions on any of the above, we're happy to address those directly. So please email us, and we will we'll discuss it. Any questions on that section? Don't see anything.
I don't see any questions published yet.
All right, I'm going to hand it back to Mari, I think.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Okay, I'm going to provide an overview of the qualifying capacity QC template and offer forms. Okay, as defined in the DRAM pro forma, the qualifying capacity means the load reduction for each PDR in the DRAM resource, calculate utilizing the capacity baseline consistent with the QC implementation guidelines and the CPC decision and the Cali Sotera. So this slide right here provides a high-level representation of all the applicable information requested in the QC Excel template, the RFO related tab, so which contains the residential and non-residential sections, and as well as this historical performance section, which is at the bottom. I don't plan to go over the specific formulas, just to provide some of the main points to be aware of. So bidders are required to submit this QC for each offer submitted using the latest version of the CPC approved template, which I think the latest is as of September 26, 2022. And a bidder's failure to provide this information would not comply with the 1907-09 decision and will disqualify the bidder's offer. So any additional rows can be added to this template, but columns and formulas should not be modified. Values should reflect the estimated QC for the month with the greatest megawatts. And then these estimates shall be based on historical information where available and otherwise publicly available performance that best represents the anticipated performance of the resource. And if you don't provide a QC estimate for each offer, at a minimum, at least one row must be filled out for each product. For example, all system and residential customer product offers can be combined into one row. However, this is dependent on your IOU's preference. And a reminder, many of these rules are defined in the PG&E's DRAM protocols or Exhibit G of the DRAM port forma. Next slide, please. So as of 2022 DRAM, the IOUs did provide additional guidance to improve the clarity and consistency of the QC estimates and supporting data provided by the bidders, and to facilitate the IOU's assessment of QC estimates. So I don't plan, again, to go over this in detail, but this is a summary table that contains the definitions and guidance for each QC template column. It's a good cheat sheet, and if you want to find, if you would like additional details, please review Resolution E-5110 and Advice Letter 6064-E. Okay, next slide, please. So the offer form evaluation submission requirements are all similar between the IOUs, with the exception of the offer deadline time on March 7th, and the maximum bid size per month. All offers must be submitted through Power Advocate. For PG&E, offers are due at 1 p.m. on March 7th and by noon for SCE and SDG&E. Offers will be evaluated by net market value for all IOUs. And there are several qualitative factors that I discussed earlier, and the adders are included in the evaluation score. And the max number of bids per IOU is 20. And max bid size is 10 megawatts for PG&E and SCE, and it's not applicable for SDG&E. And August capacity is required for all IOUs each year. Okay, next slide, please. So bidders can offer proxy demand resource consisting of residential or non-residential customers, providing capacity products such as system, local, and flex capacity, as mentioned on slide 8. Within the offer form, bidders to specify how many customers or offers would require new Rule 24, Rule 32 service accounts, and how many customers already have Rule 24 and Rule 32 service accounts. Bidders must also indicate which bids are exclusive or inclusive offers. Offers are exclusive of each other if 2 or more offers cannot be awarded. Contracts in this RFO, for example, offers 1 and 4 cannot both be shortlisted as customers are the same. And then IU calls this exclusive offer variations. And then for offers that are inclusive of each other, it means that they must be awarded contracts together. So example, offer 2 must be selected with offer 4. This is applicable only for SCE and PG&E. Okay, next slide, please. All right, let's take this time for questions.
Still not seeing any questions in the queue.
All right. Should we go ahead and move on then? Okay. Each IU will cover their specific offer form. I will cover the PG&E offer form. Next slide, please. So the PG&E offer form is posted on the 2024 DRAM website, which is www.pge.com/DRAM. You can find the offer form under the DRAM RFO Protocols and Documents section of the website. The PG&E offer form does not include qualified capacity, the QC template that I discussed earlier, The QC template is a separate Excel template found under the same section of the DRAM website. The offer form has not changed, with the exception of the instruction form tab providing more detail. When you open up the offer form, it will default see this instruction tab shown here. And if you're not familiar with this form, it's very important you read this tab before getting started. You must submit the Excel version of the PG&E offer form. No other formats will be accepted. It's the form you will use to submit to Power Advocate. You can only submit one form per participant. And you are provided 65 rows, but if you need more, please contact DRAM RFO and CC the independent evaluator, and we can enable more rows. Important thing to note about the workbooks: before you begin entering any information, you must enable the macro or enable content, and this will allow all the functions in the cells to work, and will also activate the conditional formatting. Alrighty, next slide, please. So, reading the offer form, you can always refer to the sections of the solicitation protocols, PG&E protocols, to assist you with completing the form. In this participant information tab, you enter the participant information such as bidder, scheduling coordinator, information, prior experience, and agree to be bound by the conditions of the RFO. For acknowledgement, which is like section 12 of the protocol, you must select yes, which is the only option on the dropdown. You can is to confirm you are a duly authorized representative, attest info that the info you provided on the form is correct, and you're testing you can perform all obligations under the purchase agreement and the protocol, and certify that type names act as the electronic signature. The one important field that's important, I'd like to point out at the top of the participant information is that validation field at the above, which indicates whether you have completed all required fields. So if you show 0 of the 50 entries are made, it's an indication you have not enabled the macros, and you will need to go back through to see if all the fields have any missing information. And the best way to know this is that the fields, if it's still peach and not mint green, then you have not enabled the macros. So please take your time, make sure to look at this validation field. Okay, next slide, please. The participant info tab also contains this confidential protocol, which is section 7 of the DRAM protocols. It requires sign-off to attest and acknowledge that no bidder shall collaborate or discuss with any other bidder or potential bidder strategies, whether PG&E has selected offers or not. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the offer information tab, which is section 3 of the protocols. If you would like additional information. So as mentioned, the offer form has not changed with the exception of the instruction tab providing more information. All tabs remain unchanged. As shown, the top row of the offer form provides examples on how to complete the form, and you can group offers by numbering it. You can have same offer numbers on multiple rows for different product variation of system, local, and flex, which means they're inclusive of each other. And offer 1 example has multiple rows and should be considered as part of the same offer. So there's an offer number 2 and 3 example, which are examples of exclusive of each other, meaning they have variations of the same offer and they can't both be shortlisted. It's one or the other. And then there's a maximum of 20 offers be accepted per bidder, and cells are peach when they are incomplete and terminate green when you enter a value. A few reminders are shown to the right of the screen. At minimum, each offer must include a product for August 2024. And then each resource must be at least 100 kilowatts per PDR, composed of same retail customers within the PG&E service territory and within the same sublot. And then the monthly maximum is a 10,000 kilowatts or 10 megawatts per offer. And for the monthly quantity, round the quantity to the nearest 10 kilowatts to comply with the CAISO supply plan requirement of megawatt quantity to 2 decimal places. So example, you have 1235 kilowatts should be rounded to 1240. So additionally, monthly contract prices should be limited to 2 decimal places. And I want to stress again the importance of taking your time to review your offer. The cure period is not for you to correct your offer, but it's only what PG&E specifies you must correct. Next slide, please. As mentioned in a previous slide about supplier diversity, the IUs encourage diverse business enterprises or DBEs to participate in the DRAM RFO. And for question number 1, if you are certified by more than one agency and one is CPUC, then you must select CPUC and provide certification number. A reminder to make sure you provide information on any diverse business entity subcontractors for question number 4. Next slide, please. And this is an optional tab to provide estimates of additional Rule 24 registrants. There are monthly estimates. These are monthly estimates that serve as illustrative and do not serve to limit the bid evaluation and selection. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to hand this over to Stephen to cover the CE offer form.
Mari, you're doing such a great job. Are you sure you don't want to just roll through ours?
Sure.
No.
I'm sure you'll be fine.
Great job covering all the components of valuation. So I'll be referencing what you mentioned a lot. So appreciate it.
Okay.
But I'll be walking through our offer workbook today. Listed there is our DRAM website. Feel free to take a look at both the offer workbook and any other additional information. If there's any questions on this offer form while filling it out, feel free to reach out with CCing the IE, and we'll get those answered promptly. So can head over to the next slide where we start looking at the offer workbook. So throughout our offer workbook, we try to make some consistent colorations, and so you can see here highlighted in the red box different sections which are specifically drop downs or typed in required information. So those flow through. Additionally, we have some kind of error checking, which will flag it in red text or black text appropriately, and some specific kind of validation sections that let you know what the offer workbook is looking for. You'll notice that this says 2022 DRAM offer workbook. Nothing has changed since then, so we actually just left the screenshots in here, but obviously we're talking about 2024. We can head over to the next slide. On the first tab here, the offers info, nothing has changed from last year or the year prior. Fill out your legal name appropriately, as well as credit rating. In section C down there where there's not a red box, these are the qualitative questions. So those will be a drop down with a yes or no with the kind of appropriate questions. We can head over to the next slide. This is the third tab in the offer workbook, which represents the actual RA offers themselves. So you'll see a validation message and a QC validation message. So those are referencing the individual offers and expectations of pieces of information that are missing, and we'll let you know appropriately. Once again, everything is aligned with the last few years. Mari covered the inclusivity and exclusivity extremely well. So those are in columns C and D, so you can fill those out to kind of represent if your offers are in a package, or we can only select one or the other in different combinations, and we'll flow that through our evaluation process. Additionally, we do have all of the kind of constraints with decimal places and minimum quantities and maximum quantities all built into the offer workbook like Mari covered, but they're not all specifically called out here, but you'll get pinged if you try to enter a value that's not accepted. So we can head over to the next slide. This is the QC support data tab, and is pulled kind of directly from the CAISO, directly from excuse me, the commission's template, and just slide it into our actual offer workbook. So there's another validation message up there which flows through the RA offer tab, and nothing has changed from here as well. So there's a couple of instructions by the column below that represent the individual columns, but just make sure that your offer numbers there match up with the previous tab, so you're filling out the appropriate data for the appropriate offer. So we can head over to the next slide. This is the fourth slide shown here, fourth tab shown here, the optional historical data. So if you have underlying historical performance data and want to provide the additional support, please fill out this form appropriately. And we do have a fifth tab for additional notes. This is just a section where you can kind of fill out in plain language any other notes or comments that you'd like to flow through that weren't captured appropriately or specifically in the actual offer workbook. So that's that rounds out our offer form.
Thanks, everybody. I'm gonna walk through SDG&E's offer form. Our RFO website again is sdgne.com/2024 DRAM RFO. Please go there and make sure that you use the forms posted there. No substitutes will be evaluated. And then see the RFO website for the required submittal documents. So the whole packet is there in terms of what needs to be submitted, and please submit it as the required instructions. I think just like PG&E and SCE, most of our forms are pretty much identical to last year. So for this graphic, just please make sure you fill in all your contact information, so it's comprehensive. And then the one change that we made is please do define your RA category when you fill in the offer form, and define it between system or local. And for local, please make sure that's local to SDG&E and not local to the other IOUs. And then if there is flex that's coming with your RA, please define the flex category so we can evaluate accordingly. The qualitative criteria responses that were described earlier in this webinar remains the same from the previous years, and the responses have to be in a yes or no format. And if you do have questions on the offer form or any of the other instructions or requirements, please just contact us, and we'll also respond appropriately and in a timely manner. So any questions on any of the IOU specific offer forms or related submission materials?
There are no questions in the queue at this time, so you all must be doing an amazing job.
Okay. We didn't have any other questions on anything else as well, but again, please feel free to email any of us or all of us and copy the independent evaluator on any questions that may come up at a later date. So moving to the closing remarks, just want to thank all the participants for your time, as well as IOU staff and all the presenters. Appreciate your time and engagement. We will post this slide deck as well as the recording on the 3 IOU websites in the next few days. And then please take another look at the schedules in terms of all the submission deadlines and other requirements, as well as the packet. And if there's any additional questions, just please let us know. Any other remarks or comments that IOU staff want to make before we close out?
Hi, Erin. I think we just need to remind everyone that there's a change in the availability assessment hours in 2024 for March and April. Other months are usually it's 4 to 9, but for March and April will be from 5 to 10.
Great. Okay. Not hearing anything else. Thanks again, everybody, for your time, and have a great day and have a great week.